Captain Lee Hyen stood at the window of his small ship, watching the massive alien station grow larger as they approached. The Nexus station was bigger than most cities on Earth, with thousands of ships from hundreds of different worlds docked at its metal arms. The station spun slowly in the darkness of space, creating artificial gravity for the millions of creatures living and working inside. 3 years had passed since humans first met aliens, and those 3 years had not been kind to humanity. Every alien race looked at humans the same way children look at broken toys. Something small and weak that might be amusing for a while but would never be truly useful. The galaxy was full of incredible beings, and humans were definitely not one of them. The reptilian Vaxans could grow to 12 feet tall with scales harder than the best human armor. Their claws could cut through steel like paper, and their bite could crush a car. The insectoid Threx were smaller but incredibly strong. A single Threk worker could lift a human truck over its head without breaking a sweat. They worked in perfect harmony like a giant machine made of millions of parts. The gaseous Marathians were even stranger. They had no solid bodies at all, just clouds of intelligent gas that could pass through walls and speak without mouths. The crystalline Zelkari could live for thousands of years, and their bodies were living computers that could process information faster than any human machine. And those were just the common species. The galaxy had hundreds more each, with abilities that made humans look like cavemen. Lee Hyen knew all this because he had spent the last 2 years traveling between alien worlds trying to find work for his crew. His ship, the Soul Dream, was the only human vessel allowed to dock at major alien stations. Most aliens considered humans too primitive to be trusted with important jobs. They gave human crews the worst assignments, moving garbage between systems or carrying supplies to dangerous frontier worlds where other species refused to go. The worst part was not the dangerous work or the low pay. It was the way aliens looked at humans like they were pets or children who had wandered into an adult conversation. The Vaxan trademasters would pat Hyen on the head when they gave him contracts. The Threk supervisors spoke slowly and loudly as if humans could not understand normal speech. The Marathian diplomats would laugh behind their translation devices when humans tried to negotiate better terms. His crew felt it too. Park Mina, his communications officer, had been an engineer on Earth before joining his ship. She was smart enough to fix alien technology that their own creators could not repair, but when she walked through alien stations, other species would point and whisper about how cute the little human looked trying to understand their superior technology. It made her angry, but there was nothing she could do about it. Kim Jun, his weapons officer, had been a soldier before becoming a spacer. He could outshoot most aliens in combat simulations, but they never let him prove it. Aliens assumed humans were too weak and cowardly to fight. They gave human ships the smallest weapons and refused to hire human security teams. Even space pirates ignored human vessels because everyone knew humans had nothing worth stealing. The docking process took 2 hours because human ships were given the lowest priority. Alien traffic controllers made them wait while dozens of other vessels docked first. When the Soul Dream finally received permission to approach, they were assigned to docking bay 743. In the worst section of the station, the bay was old and barely maintained, with flickering lights and broken air recyclers. As Hyen and his crew walked through the station corridors, aliens moved out of their way, not out of respect, but because they did not want to accidentally step on the small humans. Children of various species pointed at them and asked their parents questions about the strange creatures from the weak planet. The adults would smile and explain that humans were harmless little beings who needed protection from the dangerous galaxy. The Central Marketplace was a massive dome filled with vendors from across known space. Vaxan traders sold weapons that could destroy planets. Threk merchants offered services that could build cities in days. Marathian banks provided loans that could fund interstellar wars, and in one small corner, human traders tried to sell simple goods from Earth, art and music that most aliens found primitive, food that they considered bland, literature that they thought was childish. Hyen watched Park Mina as she moved through the marketplace trying to buy basic supplies for their ship. Even simple purchases were difficult for humans. The alien vendors would overcharge them, knowing humans had little choice but to pay. They would sell humans defective equipment, knowing humans could not tell the difference between good and bad alien technology. Some vendors refused to serve humans at all, claiming their products were too advanced for such a primitive species. The other human crew members had similar experiences. Kim Jun tried to buy ammunition for their small defensive weapons, but was told humans were not allowed to purchase military-grade equipment. Li Sung, the ship's mechanic, attempted to order replacement parts, but was informed that human hands were too clumsy to install alien technology properly. Each interaction reminded them that they were considered the bottom of the galactic social order. That evening, Hyan sat in the station's small human quarters reading reports from Earth. The news was not good. Alien corporations were buying up human companies for almost nothing. Alien governments were making demands that Earth could not refuse. The human military was a joke compared to alien fleets. Earth had become a client world dependent on alien charity for survival. The worst part was that some humans seemed to accept this situation. They believed aliens were superior and that humanity should be grateful for any scraps of attention they received. Human politicians made speeches about learning from their alien friends. Human scientists begged for access to alien knowledge. Human artists tried to copy alien styles, hoping for approval, but Han refused to accept it. He had seen enough of the galaxy to know that aliens were not gods. They made mistakes. They could be stupid. They could be cruel. They were just different, not better. The problem was that humans had never been given a chance to prove themselves. Every first impression had been controlled by alien expectations. Every opportunity had been limited by alien assumptions. As he prepared for sleep, Hyan thought about his crew and the millions of humans scattered across the galaxy trying to make lives for themselves in a universe that saw them as inferior. He thought about Earth slowly losing its independence to alien influence. He thought about human children growing up believing they belonged to the weakest species in existence. Tomorrow would bring another day of condescending aliens and impossible contracts, another day of being treated like a curiosity instead of an equal, another day of watching his crew endure insults and discrimination with quiet dignity. But Hyan was beginning to feel something building inside him, something that had nothing to do with alien expectations or human limitations. It was anger, pure, simple anger at the unfairness of it all. And anger, as every human knows, can be a very dangerous thing. The trouble started on the third day of their stay at Nexus Station. Captain Lee Han was reviewing cargo manifests in his small quarters when Kim Jun burst through the door without knocking. His face was red with anger and his hands were shaking. Skelex is bothering Mina again, Kim Jun said through gritted teeth. This time he cornered her in the supply corridor and wouldn't let her pass. He kept making jokes about how fragile human females are and how they need protection from big, strong aliens. Like him, Hyan felt his jaw tighten. Skelex was a vaccine trader who stood over 8 feet tall with midnight black scales and claws that could tear through metal. He had been harassing Park Mina for days now, treating her like some kind of amusing toy. The station security, all aliens themselves, had done nothing when Hyan complained. They said it was just harmless fun and that humans should learn to take jokes better. Where is she now? Hyan asked, standing up from his desk still in the corridor. Kim Jun replied. Skelex finally left, but she looked pretty shaken up. Captain, we can't let this keep happening. The crew is starting to lose respect for us. If we can't even protect one of our own people, what kind of leaders are we? Hyan nodded slowly. He had been thinking the same thing. The harassment was getting worse each day. Skelex seemed to enjoy the fact that humans could do nothing to stop him. Other aliens were starting to copy his behavior, treating human crew members like entertainment. The situation was spiraling out of control, and Hyan knew he had to act. He found Park Mina in the ship's common area, staring out the window at the stars. She was trying to look calm, but Hyan could see her hands trembling slightly when she noticed him watching. She quickly put her hands behind her back and forced a smile. "I'm fine, Captain," she said, but her voice was not quite steady. "Just another day dealing with alien hospitality. Nothing I can't handle. You shouldn't have to handle it," Hyan replied, sitting down across from her. "This is supposed to be a neutral station with rules that protect everyone. But those rules don't seem to apply when humans are involved." Mina shrugged. "What can we do, Captain? If we complain too much, they might ban human ships from the station entirely. Then where would we go? The other stations are even worse, or they don't allow humans at all. We need this place to survive." Hyan knew she was right, but that didn't make the situation any easier to accept. The galaxy had made it clear that humans were second-class citizens at best. They were tolerated as long as they stayed quiet and accepted whatever treatment aliens decided to give them. Fighting back would only make things worse. The next morning, Hyan decided to accompany his crew on their supply runs. He told himself it was just to make sure everything went smoothly, but deep down he knew. He was hoping to catch Scullix bothering one of his people. The anger that had been building inside him for months was looking for a target. They made their way to the central marketplace during the busiest part of the day. The massive dome was packed with creatures from dozens of worlds. Vaxan merchants hawked weapons and armor. Threk engineers offered construction services. Marathian bankers floated through the crowd making deals. The air was filled with the sounds of 100 different languages being translated by Universal Devices Park. Mena split off from the group to buy communication equipment from a vendor on the far side of the marketplace. Hyan watched her go, then continued with the rest of his crew to purchase fuel supplies. He was negotiating with a crystalline Zelkari merchant when he heard a commotion from across the dome. Through the crowd he could see Scullix towering over someone near the communications vendor. Hyan immediately knew what was happening. His heart rate increased and his hands clenched into fists. He excused himself from the Zelkari merchant and started pushing through the crowd toward the disturbance. As he got closer, he could hear Scullix's voice booming over the marketplace noise. "Look what I found," he was saying to a group of other Vaxan traders. "A little human female all alone and unprotected. These creatures are so delicate. I bet I could break this one just by squeezing too hard." Hyan could see Parkmina now. Scullix had grabbed her arm with one massive claw and lifted her off the ground. She was struggling, but she might as well have been fighting a mountain. The Vaxan was holding her up like a trophy, showing her to his friends who were laughing at her helplessness. Other aliens in the marketplace had stopped to watch. Some looked uncomfortable, but none of them moved to help. A few were even pointing and making jokes of their own human females are like little dolls. One Threk observer clicked in amusement. So, small and breakable. Scullix noticed the attention and decided to put on more of a show. "Maybe I should find out how much pressure human bones can take before they snap," he said, grinning to show rows of needle-sharp teeth. His grip on Mina's arm tightened and she cried out in pain. That was when Captain Li Hyan stepped into view. The marketplace noise seemed to fade as aliens noticed the small human walking calmly toward the massive Vaxan. Scullix saw him coming and his grin got even wider. "Look, another little human come to save his female. How adorable." Hyan did not say anything. He did not threaten or demand or negotiate. He simply walked up to Scullix, looked up at the 8-foot-tall alien and drew back his right fist. Every creature in the marketplace held its breath, waiting to see what the tiny human thought he could possibly accomplish. Then Hyan punched Scullix directly in the center of his armored chest. The sound echoed through the dome like a thunderclap. For a moment, nothing happened. The punch looked almost comical, a small human fist hitting scales that were supposed to be harder than diamond. But then Scullix's eyes went wide with shock and his mouth opened in a silent scream. The massive Vaxan dropped Parkmina and staggered backward, clutching his chest with both claws. Where Hyan's fist had connected, cracks were spreading through the black scales. Like a spider web, dark blood began seeping through the gaps. Scullix tried to speak, but only managed a strangled gasp before collapsing to his knees. The entire marketplace fell silent. Hundreds of aliens from dozens of species stared in complete disbelief. A human had just seriously injured a Vaxan warrior with a single punch. It was impossible. It violated everything they knew about physics, biology, and the natural order of the galaxy. Hyan helped Parkmina to her feet, checking to make sure she was unharmed. Then he calmly adjusted his uniform jacket and walked away as if nothing unusual had happened. Behind him, Scullix was still on his knees, gasping for air, while other Vaxans rushed to help him. The cracked armor on his chest would take months to heal and would leave permanent scars. As word of what happened spread through the station, aliens began backing away from any humans they could see. Some ran to communication booths to contact their governments. Others gathered in small groups, whispering frantically about what this meant for their understanding of human capabilities. Captain Li Hyan had thrown one punch, and in that single moment he had shattered every assumption the galaxy had made about his species. The weakest Race in known space had just proven they might be something else entirely, something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. The news of Captain Hyan's punch spread through Nexus Station faster than a computer virus. Within hours, every alien on the massive station had heard some version of the story. Most refused to believe it. A human injuring a Vaxxan warrior with bear. Hands was like claiming a mouse had killed a lion. It simply did not happen in the natural order of things. The Vaxxan embassy immediately demanded a full investigation. They wanted Hyan arrested and charged with assault using illegal weapons or cybernetic enhancements. Scullix himself was taken to the station's medical center where alien doctors worked frantically to repair his damaged chest. The cracks in his armor plating went deeper than anyone had initially realized. Dr. Korth, the station's head scientist, arrived at the medical center within an hour of hearing the news. Korth was a member of the crystalline Zelkari race and had spent over 300 years studying the biology of different species. He had examined everything from microscopic gas beings to creatures the size of spaceships. Nothing in his vast experience could explain how a human had generated enough force to damage Vaxxan battle armor. I need to examine this human immediately, Korth told the station commander. His crystal body flickered with excitement and confusion. There must be some explanation, hidden technology perhaps, or genetic modification. The alternative is impossible. The station commander, a proud Morathian named Whisper, was equally baffled. A gaseous alien had witnessed the punch through the station's security cameras and had watched the recording dozens of times. The force readings from the marketplace sensors showed impact levels that should have shattered every bone in the human's hand, yet Captain Hyan had walked away without even a bruise within 6 hours. Representatives from a dozen different species had arrived at the station. The Threk swarm sent their leading expert on physical combat. The Morathian Science Council dispatched their top researchers. Even the mysterious Kutherian telepaths emerged from their hidden worlds to investigate this anomaly. Captain Hyan found himself summoned to Dr. Korth's laboratory for immediate testing. He could have refused, but he was curious about the results himself. The punch had felt different somehow, like something inside him had broken free of normal limitations. He wanted to know what had happened as much as the aliens did. Laboratory was the most advanced facility on Nexus. Station machines that could analyze matter at the atomic level surrounded examination tables that could scan living beings down to their individual cells. Dr. Korth had prepared every piece of equipment he could think of, determined to solve this impossible puzzle. Please remove your shirt and lie on the examination table, Korth said, his crystal form glowing brighter with anticipation. I need to scan your entire body for any modifications or enhancements. Hyan complied, knowing that cooperation was his best option right now. The scanning beams felt warm against his skin as they penetrated every layer of his body. The machines hummed and clicked as they gathered data that would be analyzed by the most powerful computers on the station. The initial results were disappointing from Korth's perspective. Every scan showed a completely normal human male. Age 34, height 5 feet 10 inches, weight 170 pounds. No cybernetic implants, no genetic modifications, no hidden technology of any kind, just bone and muscle and blood arranged in the typical human pattern. This makes no sense, Korth muttered to himself, running the scans a second time. The readings must be incorrect. Somehow we are missing something important. Other scientists began arriving to witness the tests. The Threk expert on physical strength brought portable equipment to measure Hyan's muscle density. The Vaxxan combat specialist wanted to compare human bone structure to their own armored skeletal system. Even a representative of the ancient Kalithian race appeared to observe the proceedings. Dr. Korth decided to test Hyan's strength directly using the laboratory's force measurement devices. The first machine was designed to measure how much pressure different species could generate with their hands. Most aliens expected Hyan to perform poorly compared to stronger races. Put your fist against the sensor pad and punch as hard as you can, Korth instructed. The machine will measure the force of your impact. Hyan positioned himself in front of the device, took a deep breath, and threw a punch similar to the one that had injured Scullix. The sensor pad shook under the impact, and the machine's readings climbed rapidly before stopping at a number that made every alien in the room step backward. Impossible, whispered the Threk strength expert That reading indicates enough force to damage heavy construction equipment. They tried different tests using various materials to see what Hyun could damage with his bare hands. Steel plates that should have broken his bones crumpled under his punches. Ceramic armor that could stop plasma blasts cracked and shattered. Composite materials used in spaceship construction bent and twisted under impacts that seemed too powerful for his size. The most disturbing test came when they asked Hyun to punch a block of the same material used in vaccine armor. Plating the block was 6 inches thick and rated to withstand direct hits from military-grade weapons. Hyun hit it once and cracks spread through the entire structure. How is this possible? The vaccine combat specialist demanded. Your species has no natural armor, no enhanced bone density, no evolutionary advantages for combat. How can you generate this much force? Hyun shrugged, honestly not knowing the answer himself. I just get angry and hit things. It has always worked that way for me, even back on Earth when I was younger. I could punch through brick walls when I got mad enough. My parents thought I was just unusually strong. The scientists exchanged worried glances. This suggested that Hyun's abilities were not unique among humans. If other members of his species could perform similar feats, then every assumption about human combat capability needed to be reconsidered. Dr. Korth ran more detailed scans focusing on Hyun's muscle fibers and bone structure. What he discovered changed everything. Human muscle tissue was unlike anything he had seen before. Instead of contracting to their apparent limits, the fibers could compress far beyond what should be physically possible when flooded with stress hormones. Human muscles became incredibly dense and powerful. The bone scans were equally revealing. Human bones were not fixed structures like most species. Instead, they could rapidly increase in density and strength when subjected to stress. The calcium deposits would shift and reinforce themselves in real time, creating temporary armor that could withstand incredible impacts. But the most important discovery was in Hyun's brain scans. The areas responsible for pain perception and physical limitation showed unusual activity patterns. Most species had built-in safety mechanisms that prevented them from using their full strength to avoid injury. Humans seemed to have the ability to override these limitations completely. When you punched the vaccine, Dr. Korth said slowly, your brain essentially turned off all the normal restrictions that prevent muscle damage. It allowed your body to access strength levels that are normally impossible. Your bones reinforced themselves to handle the stress, and your pain receptors shut down to prevent interference. Humans can become temporarily superhuman when angry. Enough, the Threk expert asked. Not superhuman, Korth replied, just unrestricted. Most species are limited by their own biology. Humans appear to have evolved the ability to ignore those limits when necessary. It is actually quite terrifying from a combat perspective. Word of the test results spread even faster than news of the original punch. Within days, scientists across the galaxy were receiving detailed reports about human physiological capabilities. The implications were staggering. If humans could override their physical limitations during combat, they were potentially far more dangerous than anyone had realized. The galaxy began to look at humans very differently. The scientific reports from Nexus Station reached the Galactic Council within a week, but the real investigation was just beginning. Commander Vexstar of the telepathic Kytherian race had spent 2 centuries studying alien psychology for the Council. She had analyzed the minds of over 400 different species and considered herself an expert on how different forms of intelligence worked. The Kytherians were one of the oldest races in the galaxy. Their ability to read thoughts and emotions made them valuable as diplomats and negotiators. Most species found their mental touch comforting, like a gentle, warm breeze in the mind. But when Vexstar first attempted to scan Captain Lee Hyun's thoughts, she immediately pulled back in shock and pain. What did you experience, Commander? Asked Dr. Korth, who was observing the session along with representatives from dozens of other worlds. They had gathered in a secure facility on the neutral world of Harmony Prime to conduct the most comprehensive study of human capabilities ever attempted. Vexter was still trembling, her usually calm demeanor completely shattered. I have never encountered a mind like that, she whispered. Most species think in organized patterns, logical sequences that flow from one idea to the next. Human minds are complete chaos. She paused, trying to find words to describe what she had experienced. Inside his head there were dozens of thoughts happening at the same time, memories from his childhood mixing with tactical analysis of our current conversation, emotional reactions to things that happened years ago. Combined with calculations about fuel costs for his ship, it was like trying to read a book, where every page was from a different story. The other scientists listened with growing concern. Chaotic thinking patterns usually indicated mental illness or evolutionary failure. Species with disorganized minds rarely survived long enough to develop space travel, yet humans had not only reached the stars but were apparently capable of incredible physical feats when motivated. But there was something else. Vextar continued, her voice getting quieter. Underneath all that chaos there was something that terrified me, a core of absolute determination that could not be broken or bent. Most species have limits to their willpower, places where they will give up or compromise or retreat. Humans seem to have no such limits. She gestured toward Hyan, who was sitting calmly in an examination chair surrounded by monitoring equipment. When I touched the edges of that determination, it felt like trying to move a mountain. It was completely immovable, completely unbreakable. He will never surrender, never give up, never accept defeat, no matter what the cost to our. Korth made notes on his portable computer. This matches what we discovered about their physiology. Their bodies can override safety limitations, and their minds apparently can override psychological limitations. It is a dangerous combination. The testing continued for weeks. Scientists from across the galaxy took turns examining not just Hyan, but other members of his crew who had volunteered for the studies. Each human showed the same basic patterns: chaotic surface thoughts hiding an unbreakable core of determination, physical capabilities that could temporarily exceed apparent limitations. Park Mina surprised everyone by demonstrating that she could lift objects that weighed more than she did when she became angry enough about being underestimated. Kim Jun showed that he could ignore pain that would incapacitate most species. Lee Sung, the ship's mechanic, proved that human hands could work with precision that matched robotic systems when focused enough. The breakthrough came when a Calithian historian named Elder Thuros arrived to observe the testing. The Calithians had been studying galactic civilizations for over 50,000 years and had seen countless species rise and fall. Elder Thuros took one look at the human test results and nodded as if everything made perfect sense. These beings evolved as persistence hunters, he explained to the assembled scientists. On their homeworld, they developed the ability to chase prey for days or weeks without stopping. Other predators were faster or stronger, but humans could simply outlast anything they hunted. The implications hit the scientists like a physical blow. Most species had evolved as either predators that relied on strength and speed or prey that relied on hiding and escaping. Humans had evolved as something different, a species that never gave up, no matter how hopeless the situation appeared. Their entire psychology is built around the concept of persistence. Elder Thuros continued, they will pursue a goal for years or decades without rest. They will sacrifice everything they have to achieve something they believe is important. And they will never accept that something is impossible. Dr. Korth was frantically taking notes. This explains their physical capabilities. When they encounter resistance, their minds simply refuse to accept limitations. Their bodies respond by accessing emergency reserves that most species cannot reach, but it also explains why they were underestimated, added Commander Vextar. In peaceful situations, this persistence looks like stubbornness or stupidity. Other species see humans refusing to give up on lost causes and assume they are too primitive to recognize defeat. The testing revealed other disturbing facts about human psychology. Humans could function with injuries that would kill most species simply by deciding that dying was not acceptable. They could ignore fear, pain, and exhaustion when protecting something they cared about. They could maintain focus on long-term goals even when short-term costs were enormous. Most frightening of all, humans seemed to become more dangerous when outnumbered or facing impossible odds. Other species would retreat or surrender when the situation became hopeless. Humans would fight harder. Their determination would actually increase in direct proportion to how bad their chances. LOOKEDA Vaxxon military analyst who had been observing the tests contacted his superiors with an urgent message. Cancel all invasion plans for human-controlled systems immediately. He transmitted, these beings do not surrender. They will fight until every last one is dead, and they will take as many of us with them as possible. The Threk swarm came to similar conclusions. Their plans to enslave? Human populations were quietly abandoned when they realized that humans would never accept captivity. They would rebel, constantly sabotage everything they could reach, and inspire other enslaved species to resist as well, even the machine intelligences of the Void Collective began reconsidering their calculations about galactic stability. Humans represented a random factor that could not be predicted or controlled. They would interfere with carefully laid plans simply because they refused to accept that resistance was futile. But the most important discovery came from studying human social behavior. Humans did not just refuse to give up as individuals. They inspired the same determination in others. Captain Heian had not just defended Park Mena, he had made a statement that humans would protect each other no matter what the cost. His crew had become more confident and assertive since the incident. Other humans throughout the station were walking taller and speaking more boldly. The punch had not just cracked Vaxxan armor, it had cracked the psychological barrier that kept humans accepting second-class treatment. Galaxy was beginning to understand that they had seriously underestimated this small species from the third planet of an unremarkable star. Humans were not the weakest race in known space, they were something far more dangerous. They were the race that would never quit. And in a galaxy where most conflicts ended when one side decided the cost was too high, humans represented a completely new type of threat. They would keep fighting long after victory seemed impossible. They would sacrifice everything to protect what they believed in. They would never accept that they had lost. The scientific reports concluded with a warning that sent chills through government offices across the galaxy. Humanity should be considered extremely dangerous. Despite their apparent physical limitations, their psychological makeup makes them unsuitable for conquest. Slavery or intimidation. Traditional military doctrine may be ineffective against a species that cannot be deterred by casualties or setbacks. Captain Li Heian had thrown a single punch, but the real impact was still spreading through the galaxy, like ripples from a stone dropped in a calm lake. The scientific reports about human capabilities reached every major government in the galaxy within a month. What had started as curiosity about one unusual incident became a galaxy-wide crisis as the implications became clear. Humans were not the harmless primitive species everyone had assumed they were. They were something much more dangerous. The Vaxxan Empire was the first to react. General Krax, leader of their military forces, had built his career on conquest and intimidation. His fleets had terrorized dozens of worlds into submission using overwhelming force and the threat of total destruction. But the reports about human psychology changed everything. Cancel Operation Crimson Blade, he ordered his staff during an emergency meeting. The planned invasion of the human colonies is postponed indefinitely. His officers were confused. Sir General Krax, the humans only have a few dozen ships and no significant military technology. We could crush their entire fleet in a single battle. That is exactly the problem. Krax replied grimly. If we attack them, they will never surrender. They will fight us in space, on their planets, in their cities, and in their homes. Every human we kill will make the survivors more determined to resist. This is not a war we can win through conventional means. Similar conversations were happening across Vaxxan space. Military commanders who had spent their careers studying how to break enemy morale realized that their tactics would be useless against humans. You could not intimidate beings who became more dangerous when threatened. You could not break the will of a species that had no concept of acceptable losses. The Threk swarm faced an even worse realization. Their entire civilization was built on enslaving weaker species and using their labor to build the swarm empire. But humans could not be enslaved. A species that refused to accept defeat would never accept captivity. Queen Mother Zelix called an emergency gathering of the Threk ruling council. We must reconsider all operations involving human worlds, she announced to the assembled insectoid leaders. Our analysis shows that enslaving humans would be counterproductive. They would sabotage our equipment, inspire rebellion in other slave species, and require constant military supervision. But surely we can break their spirit, one council member clicked. Few species can maintain resistance when their young are threatened. The Queen Mother had been briefed on human pack Bonding behavior threatening human offspring would not make them submit, it would make them absolutely murderous. Every parent would become a suicide bomber. Every child would become a future terrorist. We would be creating an enemy that could never be reasoned with or controlled. The Morathian banking consortium faced different problems. Their power came from economic manipulation and debt slavery. They could bankrupt entire civilizations by calling in loans or manipulating currency markets. But humans had shown a disturbing tendency to ignore economic pressure when their core values were threatened. Senior analyst Fluxmore reviewed the economic data from Earth with growing concern. The humans are not behaving rationally, he reported. To the consortium leadership, we have imposed crippling debt terms on their government, but instead of accepting our conditions, they are developing alternative economic systems. How is that possible? Asked Director Vorthan. No species can survive without access to galactic markets. The humans are apparently willing to accept massive reductions in living standards rather than compromise their independence. Fluxmore replied, they have begun trading directly with other species, cutting us out of the transaction fees. They are even developing primitive versions of our financial instance. Was unprecedented in galactic history. Most species would accept any terms rather than face economic isolation, but humans seem to view independence as more important than prosperity. They would rather be poor and free than wealthy and controlled. The machine intelligences of the void collective ran millions of calculations trying to predict human behavior patterns. Their quantum computers worked for days analyzing every piece of data about human psychology and history. The results were deeply disturbing. Human behavior cannot be accurately predicted, announced Central Processing Unit 7749 during a collective meeting. Their decision-making process includes too many irrational variables. They will choose courses of action that harm their own interests if they believe the alternatives compromise their values. This represented a fundamental threat to the collective's long-term plans. Their strategy for galactic dominance relied on being able to predict and manipulate the behavior of biological species. Humans introduced an element of chaos that could disrupt carefully calculated scenarios. Even worse, humans showed a tendency to inspire similar unpredictable behavior in other species. The collective had already detected signs of increased rebellious activity in sectors with significant human populations. Other races were beginning to question authority and resist control in ways they never had before. The fear was not limited to the major powers. Smaller governments across the galaxy began reconsidering their relationships with human colonies. The Christarch Empire, which valued order and predictability above all else, declared human space to be a hazardous zone that their citizens should avoid. Emperor Velther issued an official proclamation that sent shock waves through diplomatic circles. The human species represents an unacceptable risk to galactic stability. Their unpredictable nature and refusal to accept rational limitations makes them unsuitable for civilized interaction. We recommend immediate quarantine of all human-controlled systems. This was essentially a declaration that humans should be treated as a dangerous plague that needed to be contained, but other species were beginning to question whether containment was even possible. Human trading ships were already spreading across the galaxy. Human ideas about freedom and resistance were taking root in populations that had accepted oppression for centuries. Captain Li Haiyan became aware of these developments during his next stop at a trading station near the Calithian border. The station master, a normally friendly Zalkari merchant, seemed nervous when the Soldream requested docking permission. Permission granted, but please understand that your stay must be brief, he transmitted. We have received advisories about increased security risks associated with human presence. When Haiyan and his crew disembarked, they found the station almost empty. Most of the usual alien traders and travelers had left abruptly. Security forces twice as large as normal patrolled the corridors. The few aliens who remained watched the humans with mixtures of fear and fascination. The humans are coming, whispered a Threk merchant to his companion. Stay away from them. I heard they can kill with their bare hands and never feel pain. Park Mina overheard the conversation and shook her head in disbelief. They are talking about us like we are monsters, she said to Haiyan, all because you punched that Vaxen bully. But Han was beginning to understand the larger implications. His punch had done more than injure Scullix, it had shattered the galaxy perception of human weakness, every alien government was now forced to reconsider their assumptions about his species. Some were backing away in fear, others were making plans that might be even more dangerous. June noticed armed security drones following. They're grouped through the station, Captain. Something is wrong here. These aliens are not just afraid of us, they are preparing for some kind of action. Hyan nodded grimly. He had been monitoring galactic news feeds, and the reports were troubling. Several militant alien factions were calling for preemptive action against humanity. They argued that a species this unpredictable could not be allowed to spread unchecked across the galaxy. The Zephyrian Crusade, a religious movement that believed in purifying the galaxy of dangerous influences, was gaining support among several species. They preached that humans represented a form of spiritual contamination that would corrupt other races if left unchecked. The Iron Legion, a military alliance of aggressive species, was proposing a different solution: total war against humanity before they could develop better technology or build stronger alliances. Better to fight them now, while they were still relatively weak, than wait until they became an existential threat. Captain Hyan realized that his single moment of anger had set events in motion that could lead to the destruction of his species. The galaxy was no longer ignoring humanity, they were taking humans very seriously indeed, perhaps too seriously. As the Soul Dream prepared to leave the trading station, Hyan received a priority message from Earth. The sender was Admiral Kim, the head of Earth's tiny space fleet. The message was brief but urgent. Captain Hyan, return to Earth immediately. All human ships are being recalled. Galactic situation has become critical. We may be facing a war we cannot win. The punch that was supposed to defend one crew member had accidentally started a conflict that could destroy the entire human race. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was unlike anything in recorded history. Representatives from over 200 species had gathered on the neutral world of Harmony Prime to discuss what they were calling the human problem. The Great Assembly Hall buzzed with nervous energy as delegates debated the fate of an entire species. Captain Lee Hyan stood in the center of the hall, surrounded by a sea of alien faces. Some looked at him with fear, others with curiosity, and a few with barely contained hostility. He had been summoned to speak for all of humanity, a responsibility that felt heavier than carrying a mountain. The Zephyrian delegate was calling for immediate quarantine. Humans must be contained to their home system, he declared, his crystalline body pulsing with righteous anger. They are a contamination that threatens the spiritual purity of all civilized beings. The Iron Legion representative demanded something more extreme. These creatures cannot be reasoned with or controlled. She roared, her metallic voice echoing through the hall. The only solution is complete elimination before they spread their chaos further. But then a voice spoke that made everyone fall silent. Elder Zophran of the ancient Calithian race had risen from her seat. Her crystalline body glowed with the wisdom of 50,000 years, and when she spoke, the entire galaxy listened. I request a private audience with the human, she announced simply. I wish to understand what we are truly dealing with. Before any permanent decisions are made, the request could not be refused. Elder Zophran was the oldest living being in known space. She had seen species rise and fall, had witnessed the birth and death of entire civilizations. If anyone could judge humanity's place in the galaxy, it would be her. The meeting took place on a small diplomatic vessel in neutral space. Elder Zophran had brought only a few translators and observers. The other species watched nervously through communication links, unsure whether they were about to witness humanity's salvation or condemnation. Elder Zophran studied Captain Hyan carefully with eyes that had seen the birth of stars. Then she did something that surprised everyone in the room. Instead of asking about human military capabilities or territorial ambitions, she simply said, "Tell me about your world." Hyan was caught off guard by the question. He had prepared to defend his species, to argue for their right to exist, but the elder wanted to know about Earth itself, so he began to speak about blue skies and white clouds, about oceans that sparkled in sunlight and mountains that touched the heavens. He told her about cities where millions of humans lived together despite their differences, about art and music that could make people cry with beauty, about stories and poems that captured the dreams of an entire species. He spoke of human children playing in parks of old People sharing wisdom of lovers, walking hand in hand under starlight. The elder listened without interruption, her ancient face showing no emotion, but Hyan could sense that something was changing in her perception as he spoke. He told her about human scientists who spent their lives trying to cure diseases, about teachers who devoted themselves to helping children learn, about ordinary people who would risk everything to help strangers. When he finished speaking, Elder Zofran was quiet for a long time. The chamber remained silent as she processed what she had heard. Finally, she spoke in a voice that carried the weight of millennia. I have seen this before, she said slowly. Long ago, when my own people were young and feared by others, we too were misunderstood because our abilities seemed dangerous to those who did not know us. She turned to address the representatives watching through the communication links. My fellow beings, I believe we have made an error in our assessment of humanity. Yes, they possess unusual capabilities that could be used for destruction. But the same could be said of any powerful species. The key question is not what they can do, but what they choose to do, and from what. I have learned humanity has consistently chosen to protect the weak, to help those in need, and to sacrifice for ideals greater than themselves. A Vaxen delegate interrupted. But Elder, what about their unpredictability, their refusal to surrender? Their psychology makes them impossible to control. That is exactly why they are valuable, Elder Zofran replied. Think carefully about the problems that face our galaxy. Corruption among the powerful species that exploit the weak, systems of oppression that seem impossible to change. She gestured toward Hyan. This species has something that most of us have lost or never possessed. They have the ability to look at an impossible situation and refuse to accept it. They will fight against injustice even when victory seems hopeless. They will protect others even at great cost to themselves. The implications of her words began to sink in across the watching delegates. Elder Zofran was not just defending humanity. She was suggesting they could serve a purpose that no other species could fill. I propose that humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, she announced, but more than that, I suggest we offer them a new role as peacekeepers and mediators. Their unique psychology makes them ideal for situations where other species might give up or compromise their principles. The debate that followed was intense. Many species remained fearful of human capabilities, but Elder Zofran's reputation and wisdom carried enormous weight. When the vote was finally taken, humanity was accepted into the Galactic Council by the narrowest margin in its history. But the real change came in the days that follow.